Welcome to Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation of history's most interesting people. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these fascinating lives. Now, let's meet our guest. I am beyond excited for today's show. We have a literal legend in the studio, or at least in the digital ether. For those who may somehow not know who you are you?
Hi, Calvin. I am Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Or, if you want to be formal, Johannes Chrysostomus Wolfgangus Theophilus Mozart. Though most of the time I just preferred Wolfgang.
That is quite the mouthful. So, tell us, when and where were you born?
I was born on January 27th, 1756, in the beautiful city of Salzburg, Austria. It was a cold winter night, right around 8 o'clock.
And you mentioned that long list of names. Was there a story behind your birth name?
Well, Johannes Chrysostomus was for the saint's day on which I was born, Saint John Chrysostom. The name means golden-mouthed, which I always thought was rather fitting for a composer, don't you think? Wolfgang was for my maternal grandfather, and Theophilus, which I usually turned into Amade or Amadeus, means loved by God. My father, Leopold, was very proud of that one.
I can imagine. What was your hometown of Salzburg like growing up?
Salzburg was charming, but to a young boy who was constantly traveling, it sometimes felt a bit small. It was a city of music and mountains, ruled by the Prince Archbishop. It was beautiful, certainly, but my heart always yearned for the grand stages of Vienna and Paris.
Speaking of heart, what was your family life like?
Music was our life. My father, Leopold, was a composer and a teacher, and he dedicated himself entirely to the education of my sister Nannerl and me. We were very close. My mother, Anna Maria, was a kind soul who even traveled with me to Paris later on. We were a family of performers, always practicing, always traveling in a cramped carriage from one royal court to the next.
You were famous so young. What kind of kid were you?
I was full of energy. I loved to play, but I also loved the attention. By the age of 5, I was already writing down little tunes, and by 6, I was performing for the Empress Maria Theresa in Vienna. I was a bit of a showman, I suppose. I loved to laugh and make jokes, even while I was mastering the keyboard.
Did you have any big fears growing up, or were you too busy performing?
Oh, like any child, I had my worries. I think my biggest fear was disappointing my father. He invested so much in me, and I always wanted to prove that his miracle child was worthy of the effort.
And what did you dream of becoming as a child? Was it always music?
Always. I never really knew anything else. From the moment I could reach the keys, I wanted to create sounds that had never been heard before. I dreamed of writing grand operas that would make people weep and cheer.
What were some of your favorite activities in school?
School? My father was my school. He taught me everything. Languages, math, and of course, music. I loved math, actually. I used to scribble numbers all over the walls and floors when I was a boy. I found a certain rhythm and logic, just like in a sonata.
That makes sense. What was your first job?
My first official post was as a court musician for the Prince Archbishop of Salzburg when I was just 17. I was a concertmaster, but I'll be honest, Calvin, I felt like a servant. I wanted to be a free artist, not just someone told when and what to play.
Was there a moment where you realized you were different from everyone else?
Perhaps when I was in Rome as a teenager? I heard Allegri's Miserere in the Sistine Chapel. It was a closely guarded secret, and the score wasn't allowed to leave the chapel. I listened to it once, and then went back to my room and wrote the entire thing down from memory. That was a moment when I realized my ears worked a bit differently than most.
That is incredible. What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
Leaving Salzburg for good in 1781. I had a bit of a disagreement with the Archbishop. He actually had me dismissed with a kick to the backside. At the time, it was scandalous and frightening to be without a steady job. But it allowed me to move to Vienna as a freelance composer. That was the real beginning of my life.
A literal kickstart. What would you say was your biggest break?
The success of my opera, The Abduction from the Seraglio in Vienna. It proved that I could write popular music in German that the people actually loved. It made me the talk of the town.
What were your biggest struggles before that success?
Money. It was always money. Even when I was famous, I struggled to manage my finances. And the travel, spending months in cold carriages, away from home, trying to find a patron who would appreciate my work without treating me like a footman.
Did you ever consider quitting?
Never. Music was not a choice for me. It was like breathing. Even when I was down to my last florin, I was still writing.
Were there any specific daily habits or routines that you felt were essential to your success?
I was a morning person. I would rise at 6, be at my desk by 7, and compose until 10. The rest of the day was for lessons and performing, and then I'd often compose again in the evening. I worked very hard, though I liked to make it look easy.
What job would you have had if fame never happened?
Oh, perhaps a mathematician or even a clockmaker? I loved things that were intricate and perfectly timed. But truly, I cannot imagine a world without my piano.
What was your life like before fame?
I don't really remember a time before quote-unquote fame. I was a child prodigy, so I was being poked and prodded by kings and queens since I was 6 years old. It was a very public childhood.
How did your relationships change after you became a success?
It became harder to know who was a true friend. But I found my great love, Constanza Weber. We married in 1782. Some people, including my father, didn't approve, but she was my muse and my best friend. We faced many hardships together, but we always had our laughter.
Did fame bring you happiness?
It brought me the opportunity to hear my music performed by the best musicians in the world. And that is a kind of happiness that is hard to describe. But fame itself, it's a fickle thing. One day you are the toast of Vienna, and the next, they are looking for the next new thing.
What was the downside of becoming famous?
The gossip. People always had something to say about my spending, my jokes, or my arrogance. And the pressure to constantly produce something better than the last piece was exhausting.
What misconceptions did people have about you?
That I was just a, quote, divine flute that music poured out of without effort. I studied the works of Bach and Handel intensely. Every note was carefully considered, even if I wrote them down quickly.
What was your darkest moment?
Losing my mother while we were in Paris. I was young, far from home, and I felt so alone. It was a very heavy time for my heart.
What past regrets did you carry that you spoke about?
I suppose I regret not being better with my money. I would often have to write to my friend Michael Puchberg to beg for loans. I spent what I had on fine clothes and a nice apartment because I wanted to live like the genius I knew I was, but it caused a lot of stress for my dear Constanza.
What's something people misunderstood about your life?
People often thought I was childish because I loved silly jokes and puns. But one can be a serious artist and still enjoy a good laugh. Life is too short to be solemn all the time.
Tell me about a time when everything went wrong, and how did you handle it?
My trip to Paris in 1778 was a disaster. I couldn't find a good job, my mother fell ill and passed away, and I felt like a failure. How did I handle it? I kept writing. I wrote a symphony, the Paris Symphony, and I just kept moving forward.
Did fame and fortune change your life?
Fortune was always slipping through my fingers, but fame gave me a legacy. It allowed my music to live on in the streets and the opera houses long after I was gone.
What personal battles were you fighting privately?
The constant battle for health. I was often ill, and the stress of trying to provide for my family while my own health was failing was a heavy burden to carry in those final years.
Who had the biggest influence on your life?
My father, certainly, he gave me my craft. But also Joseph Haydn. He was like a father to me in music. He once told my father that I was the greatest composer he knew, and that meant more to me than any royal medal.
What was life like in your final years?
In 1791, I was incredibly busy. I was working on the Magic Flute, the Clemency of Titus, and my clarinet concerto. I felt a surge of creativity, even though I was feeling quite ill. I was writing like a man possessed.
And what were you working on right before you passed away?
The Requiem. A mysterious stranger had commissioned it, and I began to feel like I was writing it for my own funeral. I didn't get to finish it, but my student Süssmeyer helped complete it for my sketches.
When and where and how did you pass away, and how old were you?
I passed away in Vienna on December 5th, 1791. I was only 35 years old. It was a sudden illness, fever, swelling, and such. The doctors did their best, but their treatments were often worse than the disease.
That is so young. What's a random fact about you most people have never heard?
I loved billiards. I had a table in my apartment and would often play for hours to clear my head between composing.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you?
Oh, that Antonio Salieri poisoned me! Poor Salieri. We were rivals in the way all composers are, but he didn't kill me. We actually respected each other's work quite a bit.
What was your most unique habit?
I would often compose in my head while I was doing other things, eating, talking, or even playing billiards. By the time I sat down at the paper, the music was already finished in my mind.
What was your favorite food?
I wasn't much of a foodie, as you say today. I ate for energy. But as a boy, I was very fond of liver dumplings with sauerkraut. My father once wrote that I specifically asked for them during a trip to Paris.
Did you have a favorite restaurant?
I enjoyed the coffee houses in Vienna. They were the center of social life, where you could hear the latest news and gossip.
What was your favorite book?
I loved the plays of Metastasio, and of course the librettos I worked with. I was always looking for stories that had soul and fire.
Did you have any known rivalries?
There was always competition in Vienna. Clementi and I had a famous piano duel. He was very technical, but I like to think I had more expression.
Tell us a story nobody talks about.
I once had a pet starling. I bought him because he could whistle a theme from my piano concerto number 17. When he died, I actually held a small funeral for him and wrote a poem. He was a very musical bird.
That is adorable. What's your funniest behind-the-scenes moment?
During the rehearsals for The Marriage of Figaro, the singers were so excited by the music that they kept breaking into spontaneous applause. It was chaos, but the best kind of chaos.
Did you ever prank someone?
Oh, all the time! I loved writing silly, nonsensical letters to my cousin Maria Anna, full of wordplay and bathroom humor. I was a bit of a prankster at heart.
What was the most outlandish purchase you made?
I once bought a very expensive lace jabot and fine silk stockings when I definitely couldn't afford them. But a composer must look the part, mustn't he?
What advice would you give people chasing success?
Do not just aim for perfection. Aim for passion. Technique can be learned, but the fire must come from within. And never stop laughing. Even when the world is heavy, a good joke and a beautiful melody can save your soul.
Wolfgang, this has been an absolute delight. Do you have any closing remarks about our interview or the stories you shared today before we sign off?
Only that it has been a joy to remember the music and the laughter. Thank you, Calvin, for bringing me back for a moment. To your listeners, keep the music playing. It is the only language that everyone understands. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here, Wolfgang. What a journey through the life of a true genius. From his childhood as a prodigy in Salzburg to the frantic, brilliant final year in Vienna. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.